I will begin. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar about the community One Stop for Growth. I think everybody has heard that name probably 1,000 times over the last couple of months, but thank you for joining Old Colony Planning Council. My name is Mary Waldron, and I'm the Executive Director. For those not familiar with OCPC, as we fondly call ourselves, we are the regional planning agencies for most of Plymouth County and a few of the neighboring towns. We assist our 17 communities in planning for present and future needs, utilizing our local knowledge, technical expertise, and regional collaboration. To learn more about us, please visit our website, ocpcrpa.org. Before we begin, I'd like to thank OCPC's Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy Committee for co-hosting the webinar today. One of our co-chairs, Mary Ellen Brett from Massasoit Community College, is unable to make it today, but sends her regards, along with John Murray. He is of Mass Higher Grader Brockton Career Center, and they've been leading the CEDS committee through a collaboration process to strengthen our regional economy. This webinar is part of that work. Today, we're welcoming Juan Vega, Assistant Secretary for Communities and Programs at the Massachusetts Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development. That is a mouthful. We should just use the acronym sometimes, right? And also welcome Marc Horne. He's the Deputy Director for Community and Economic Development. Just quickly, Juan and I've had an opportunity to get to know each other through various roles, but both the Secretary and Marc's focus is helping communities prepare for success by working to empower local and municipal leaders and better connect them to existing resources. So today they'll be discussing the recently launched Community One Stop for Growth, the application portal, and collaborative review process for grant programs, including MassWorks. I know that you're scheduled on our this coming Friday's MARPA meeting, and we'll be looking for more conversation at that point. But if you have, here's a couple things that I'd just like to have you keep in mind. If you have any questions at any time, please submit them through the Q&A at the button that's at the bottom of your screen. To see, and if you prefer to ask a question live, please click the raise hand button at the end of the presentation, and we'll call upon you. A recording, we are recording this as a webinar, and it will be available in the next couple days on our website, and we'll be able to send that link out to you. But without further ado, I just want to be able to thank Juan, Secretary Vega, for being here today. He's been resourceful to us. He's been available, responsive, and it's made a whole lot of difference. We were just talking about it's been 1 year since the pandemic, and from day one, he's been accessible to not only Old Colony Planning Council and our staff, but to the Commonwealth. So with that, Secretary, I'd like to turn this over to you. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Mary, and the team, Joanne, Dottie, Elijah, and Laurie, for the invitation, certainly, to join you today. We've been, as Mary has mentioned, we've been talking about this Community One Stop now for a little while, and we've had this, we always like this opportunity to kind of talk generally and overview, but more importantly, to hear questions as well. A lot of you may have participated in the webinars that we've done for the actual One Stop, which are available on our website, and maybe have looked at the NOFA, et cetera, and may have now some specific questions that we're happy to try to answer as well. As Mary mentioned, Marc Horne has joined us. He's the Deputy Director with our team, who's been partnering with me and the others as we've rolled out this exciting new initiative. It's been, we were working through this before the pandemic hit, and then we kind of continued through and were able to launch this in January. And this essentially changes a little bit the paradigm on how HED kind of looks at grant making for a lot of the community development programs. And so we'll go through a deck, and I think, we particularly want to point out the areas, the programs that are included, and then also highlight the ones that are not included in this One Stop, which is just as important because that falls into what we're calling the referral process. So Marc, you have the deck, right, handy?
I do. Sorry, we didn't have a chance to coordinate on which one we
Yeah.
finalized on.
Yeah.
But I do have
The one from this morning, the one from this morning I emailed, it says overview.
Yep.
'Cause
Okay.
I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure I was gonna have good Wi-Fi today, and so I had asked Mark to have the deck ready.
Sorry, folks, and we had a I don't know if anyone else experienced this, but we had a technological meltdown yesterday with 365.
Yeah.
So I'm pulling up now.
Yeah, no problem. And so as he does that, like I said, really we want to communicate how, for the Executive Office of Housing and Economic Development, along with DHCD and Mass Development, are the three agencies that are coordinating to really develop this new program.
I'm just getting an error message about sharing my screen. If someone's able to allow me to do that.
I believe I just did, Mark. Try again.
Okay. Let me see here. Okay, here it is. Is that coming through now?
Yeah, yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. Let me
If you
just go into
the full screen. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, wrong view.
No, yeah. on the bottom right, Mark, there's that little kind of easel looking thing right next to the volume. That should do the trick.
Sorry.
Yeah. And right next to it.
There it goes.
That should do the trick. All right, awesome. So we'll walk through this deck. It has kind of the overview elements. Like I said, we'll happily move to the question and answer period. So if we just kind of advance to the first slide, we kind of start by setting kind of the context, how this all came to be. During the listening tour, Secretary Keneally and Lieutenant Governor Polito both participated in these regional sessions right around the economic development plan. And we traveled throughout the state, and a lot of what we heard, in addition to great input into the plan, we did get a lot of feedback about grant programs, how communities have a hard time knowing what's available when, having access to these programs, how they're all in different timelines, and sometimes, particularly for the small towns, they can be time-consuming, complicated processes, et cetera. And so what we did in terms of thinking about this is we developed this single application portal. And I'll talk some more in detail about that in a moment. The programs include multiple grant programs that you should all be familiar with. And we've also built in this referral, guidance, and collaborative review kind of component, which we think is, and we hopefully you see as kind of the game changer here as far as how we interact from our state agencies and the folks running programs with the communities and the organizations. On the next slide, we have kind of the overview. The Community Compact Connector, which many of you may be familiar with, was launched by the Lieutenant Governor, which is a website that essentially organizes in a centralized grant finder and calendar all of the state programs. And so that dealt with the part about how do I find out what's available. The second part of the feedback we got was about then how do we actually access these programs? And so building on the success of the connector, we developed this one-stop model to streamline the actual grant processes. And we do so in coordination with the Community Compact. And we feel that that's particularly important now in terms of the efforts that we're all moving towards in terms of recovery from the pandemic, to be able to make these things more streamlined, easier to access, smoother in terms of process. On the next slide, we have the kind of an overview of the benefits I think that we've identified. We feel that the communities and the organizations can be considered for more than one grant program simultaneously. We've built in this feedback loop that I will be describing further. We also want to be able to do direct referrals to other programs within our own agencies, but also within other state agencies. Sometimes communities are talking to us about a project and don't realize that maybe EEA has a funding source that can help, or Mass DOT, et cetera. And so we're trying to build that in as well. The secretary was particularly interested in removing the redundant legacy projects. And so that was one of the things that we used to build this one stop. So one of the models here, this is a kind of a graphic that shows the old, what we call the old process. And so we mapped out what we thought was a hypothetical community initiative. This is a downtown initiative where the community is trying to do some revitalization. They happen to be housing choice community. The site is going to need some demolition of a dilapidated structure, maybe some brownfields cleanup. And they want to do all this because they're trying to position themselves to bring in market rate housing to their downtown. And so for a community to do that in the old process, they would have to research and look around and find various programs. You know, for something like this, you know, potentially MassWorks could help, the Brownfields funds could help, the Housing Choice Capital grants could help, etc. And so those are 5 different programs. As many of you know, they're in different deadlines throughout the year. All in all, we figured, you know, these are 5 applications, 300 plus questions across 4 months. And the communities all put together these applications. They're unaligned in terms of timing. You might need to do the brownfields cleanup before you can do the construction of the road, for example, or getting the infrastructure done. But the grant programs and the deadlines don't necessarily follow that cadence. And so you might get an award or you might not get an award from one or the other, and that puts the project in jeopardy. And so the way we are thinking about this in the next slide is how we actually, you know, have created this one stop. And so we've created this one portal and this one application with one deadline. It's in June. The deadline will be June 4th for the what we're calling the full applications, which is what the, you know, what the organizations would actually complete in order to request funding for their projects. And then it will all go through this review process with ultimately getting responses all at the same time in November. We've built in this process kind of before the full app, which is on the left-hand side here. It is optional, but highly recommended. The expression of interest is a process by which we're asking the organizations to fill out a very short form. Tell us what your goals are, what have been some of the challenges, what have you done over the last 5 years to promote economic development, etc. And then we invite you to put in up to 5 different project ideas. And very high level, what's the name of the project, you know, brief description, what are you thinking? And then the idea is we will then coordinate a feedback for that. We get together our group of the 3 agencies, review these, and then provide written feedback to the community. And the idea here is to try to give a sense to the community of where their project might actually fall and where the project might be more competitive. And conversely, we also want to indicate to a community, you know, what you're describing here sounds like it's too early for a bigger grant, that maybe you should consider doing some more preparation. The idea being to save the community time with investing a lot of time into a full application for a project that maybe is not really ready for full funding. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. In the next slide, we have, for kind of context, many of you maybe remember when MassWorks was created in 2011. There used to be 6 different programs across multiple secretariats that all did community development and infrastructure funding. And so in 2011, through a legislative action, they were statutorily combined. And so the 6 programs actually went away. They all became MassWorks, a much broader, larger, more flexible pool of resources for public infrastructure. On the right-hand side, this is, we want to highlight how, for those of you that have pursued funding for affordable housing, are familiar with the rental rounds, and this is under DHCD, there are actually 14 different funding sources that support the rental rounds. But we don't ask communities to submit 14 applications. You submit 1 through the rental round, lay out your entire project, and then the team kind of behind the scenes then mixes and matches. If your project is good, then it mixes and matches the sources of funding that the state will then be willing to invest in your project. And so we're looking for this consolidated purpose that both of these examples show, but we're more directly replicating the rental round in terms of the programs underneath still continue to exist, but we're asking you to submit your project and let us do the work of mixing and matching to help you get your projects funded. In the next slide, so this slide represents, so we launched in January 2021. And these are the 10 actual programs that we've now incorporated into the One Stop. I will note that the Secretary Kennedy, is very interested in the future years looking to expand this list and add more programs to it. But right now we have the 3 programs, MassWorks, Urban Agenda, and Expedited Permitting under HED, Housing Choice, and the 4 programs that are under DHED and 3 programs under Mass Development. A particular note is that 3 of these programs, which are marked new, are brand new this year coming out of the Economic Development Bond Bill, which was recently signed by the governor. In the next slide, we have, okay, so this is an important and a kind of a key, if you will, the meat of this thing, how we consider the distribution of resources. So the development continuum is how our agencies have now, in this infographic, what we're trying to communicate is we see that any type of community development or economic development project generally has a life cycle. And there's a life cycle in terms of what you do at the beginning to prepare, some of the things that have to be put in place, and you build up until you're actually ready to put shovels in the ground, to rebuild a road, or rebuild the sidewalks, etc. That is typically under MassWorks. And so what happens, what we found happens a lot is a lot of communities, kind of make the mad dash and try to apply to MassWorks and put kind of all their eggs in that basket, and in fact may not be ready. And so we end up having to not, to deny a lot of good projects that just were not ready. And so we're asking now communities to take a real hard look at where their project actually falls in terms of readiness. If you haven't done any feasibility, if you haven't done any design, etc., you want to look at potentially coming in for funding, because there is opportunity to give you funding for earlier parts of this continuum. On the left-hand side, what we have as the header of preparing for growth, we consider these 3 buckets or categories to be where a community is when they're trying to prepare themselves for potential development. This is kind of where the build it and they will come kind of concept probably falls into place. This is where you might have town-owned land that you think you would love to RFP out to a developer to bring housing or to bring commercial development to your community, but it needs cleanup. Maybe it doesn't have water and sewer infrastructure yet to the site, and so it makes it less marketable, things like that. And so we see that as, you don't yet have exactly an idea of what the development will be, but you are prepared to either make the zoning changes or really be able to take those steps to develop something. And so we see you being able to come into this planning and zoning or site prep side of the continuum. But then once you have a developer actually in your sites or actually already in play, and there are some things that you think you can do to actually get a development to happen, then we have this catalyzing specific project side, where we see we want to be making investments in projects that are going to actually result in imminent private development. And so keeping in mind that all the programs in the One Stop are under the economic development kind of house of state grants. And so we're looking to catalyze, we're looking to incentivize and leverage private investment with the idea of increasing the number of jobs in the Commonwealth, increasing the number of housing units in the Commonwealth, etc. So moving on to the next slide. This is another graphic that what we're trying to communicate here is how we at the state level have mapped out essentially under each category where we think the source of funding would be. And so to demonstrate that we think we're able to fund pretty much anything along this continuum. Moving on, again, this is for guidance, and there's nuance to all this. The referral process is also a key element here, where we realize we're not able to, in all cases, fund a project in the way that it is being proposed. And by reading especially your expression of interest, we think we may have a view into that maybe the community or the organization may not realize that there are other funding sources that match what they're trying to do, and they may not know about it yet. And so our hope is to be able to create this referral process built into the feedback that we're giving you as part of the expression of interest, and say, you know what, this project looks like it might be also a good fit in real estate services, for example, at mass development. Or have you looked at, a lot of communities already know about the state revolving fund, but there are some that don't, right? And so they're trying to do water project and don't realize that maybe they may be eligible for SRF. There's also, the Seaport Economic Council and dredging come into play for a lot of the coastal communities. And we want to make sure that they know about that. And a lot of these programs here don't, at the moment, neatly fit into the continuum, but some do, which is back to what I was saying about the Secretary's interest. There are going to be programs here that we will eventually move into the one-stop. And then there'll be referrals at the beginning in the expression and then also in the full app. And I think finally, we want to kind of just map out the overview of the timeline. We launched in January. We're currently accepting expressions of interest through April 2nd. These are optional and they're rolling. So the sooner you get them in, the sooner you get your feedback. And then April 2nd will be the deadline for that. Starting now until June, you can start working on your full application as well, but you will only be able to submit those between May 3rd and June 4th. So it's important to keep in mind those deadlines. There's that window during which we will be able to then do the full applications. Then we expect to go through the summer. We will take all the full applications. The 3 agencies will be meeting on a regular basis to go through these. And we will be making the notifications of awards and referrals. We expect in the October-November timeframe, similar to how we do MassWorks. And then we're contracting in November and December. I would note that the 10 programs that are in the one-stop remain standalone programs. They were not merged, right? So each of the programs has their specific guidelines and specific kind of nuance in terms of what's eligible, what's not eligible. And so it's important for the communities to look at the guidelines. We have links to all of them on the website in order to get a sense of where of what each of the programs is going to need. And then the award, your application may result in 1 award. It may result in 3 awards from different programs. And then there'll be individual contracts that get done from that. And in the final slide, I think we just kind of highlight, so the one-stop website is mass.gov /one-stop. We have on there the recorded virtual sessions that were held, the 3 webinars, which are available at any time. We, again, invite you to carefully review the NOFA and then the program guidelines for any of the specific programs that you think you're interested in. We prepared, the deadline, as I've already mentioned, for the expression is April 2nd. For the full app, it's June 4th. And we just, yep, and I think that kind of concludes. I see there are a lot of questions were coming into the Q&A. I haven't seen any of them yet. So I would ask, Mary or Dottie or somebody to kind of help us work through the questions that came in.
Great. Thank you very much, Secretary Vega. We do have some questions. If anybody has any additional questions, please put them into the Q&A, or you can also raise your hand and we'll allow you to talk. So the first question that I have here is, if a community is already planning or contracted to use DLTA funds with their regional planning agency to make recommendations about sites suitable for 43D expedited permitting during this calendar year, Should they be entering an expression of interest now to keep EOHED informed?
Excellent question. So actually, we've done a lot of these. I don't know that that question has come up yet, so that's a good one. So what we intend to, so what this full app will do is give the applicant the ability to complete the first half of the new 43D application. So I will start there. The 43D program will has a new application, and the first half of that application you can just fill out in the one stop. Now, I would say to that community, if you are coming in to ask for funding for infrastructure as well and other things that you're going to put into the full app, it probably would save time to just because the same information that you're going to fill out for the full app is what the 43D board is going to use for the first half. So it may save you time to do it as part of the one stop. If you're only pursuing 43D and you're not intending to come in for funding requests and the other programs, then I would continue just working with your RPA and just following that, because it'll essentially be the same application. The reason to use the one-stop portal is if you're also applying for grants in the other programs, because you'll get a kind of a 2-for-1. Once you fill out the full app, it'll count for both the grant program and for 43D, if that makes sense. And so as far as letting us know, I think, it'll be fine once, you don't, like I said, you don't have to do the one stop just to let us know that you're thinking about 43D. I'm not sure if that, I don't know, Mark, if you had any other thought on that. I'm not sure if that kind of covers
No,
it.
I think that's right. I don't think every 43D needs to go through an EOI, but I think Juan makes a good point. If you're considering a project that has, infrastructure development needs like in the near future, you might get, an applicant might get some benefit from going through the process. And in general, I think we're just fans of the expression of interest because it kind of lets us know what's going on early in the process. So there's really no, besides the time commitment of actually filling it out, there's really no downside to filling out an EOI in that case.
Great, thank you. Another question, what are the matching requirements?
Interesting. So as I said, all of the programs, the 10 programs remain standalone, and none of the programs have a match requirement at all. Now, having said that, we do ask if you have a match in all the programs. When they fill out the budget sections, it does ask you have a match. So while it's not required, I will say in the review phase, we do take into account if a community does put in a match. It bodes well, or a lot of these programs, all things being equal, if a community is putting a little bit of their own Chapter 90 money in, for example, and they're asking for infrastructure, that bodes very well in the review. All things being equal, a community that is putting in something, and something can be, a small amount. There's no like set amount. It's just the act of actually contributing to the project as well is always viewed very positively by reviewers in general, I would say.
Thank you. We've got another one. If funds come from more than one source, do applicants have to report to more than one agency on progress?
So I think the answer is yes. To the extent that if you were to receive, let's say you put in an infrastructure project that has, a site readiness component where you're clearing out a parcel, and then you're also getting money from MassWorks to bring in water and sewer to the site, that would result in still 2 separate contracts, one with HED and one with Mass Development. Then you would still have to follow whatever the requirements of that program are. These programs still exist independently. What we're streamlining is how you apply to them and how they get reviewed. And so we feel that understanding what you're trying to do at that location, like you're trying to clean up the site to get it ready for housing and you need the water and sewer. We're hoping to give you an answer on both awards at once so that then the community can plan and doesn't, what happens now is that if you do get a MassWorks, but you still need the cleanup of the site, you don't get to apply for that until a few months later. And maybe you may get it and maybe not. We're trying to help the communities by trying to give an answer. If it's a good project, we'll give an answer and give you the package, if you will. But these will still be independent contracts with each agency.
Great, thank you. Will a consultant on behalf of the municipality be able to fill out and submit the expression of interest and/or the application?
Mark, that's yours.
Good question. So we should talk a little bit about roles here in the system. So every organization that applies, whether it's a municipality, a nonprofit, a for-profit, a quasi-public, a housing authority, anything, any organization needs to have a local grant administrator. Only the local grant administrator attached to the organization can open up and submit projects. Consultants can fill out the whole thing though. And the reason we do it this way, is we want the organization itself to have control about what gets submitted, and we just want to avoid a situation where a consultant, accidentally submits a application without permission, which happens from time to time. We'd like to avoid that, especially with the expression of interest, because you can only submit one. So the short answer is the consultant can fill out the entire application, just can't open it up or submit it. So it'd be very important for anyone that wants to apply, any organization that wants to apply, to have their own grant administrator set up, and then that grant administrator can work with the consultant to fill out the application. But the consultant can fill out the whole thing, just can't actually hit submit.
I would add, right, that that once the grant administrator is established for that organization, they can add a consultant or add grantee staff to their account in the system to work on their application on their behalf. And when they get to the full application, it'll work the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say for the full application, there is a certification page, just like we have in MassWorks and a lot of these programs, where the person submitting has to certify that they're actually authorized to submit it on behalf of their organization. We don't require like a board vote or a council, a select board vote, but some towns do. So we defer to you, the applicant, to determine what your town requires. If your town has a rule that says the select board must authorize or vote to approve submission, then we expect you to follow that. So that's why we make the grant administrator, which is, we see the grant administrator usually needing to be the municipal CEO or a designee of that person. Just whoever is authorized. And usually the rule of thumb is anybody that's authorized to sign a contract on behalf of the organization should be the grant administrator. But the municipal CEO can designate the economic development director if they want, or whoever they want to be grant administrator. But they do so knowing that they're giving that person the authority to submit the document in the end on behalf of the organization.
Great, thank you. Just a reminder for folks, if you'd like to ask a question, please put it into the Q&A or you can raise your hand. We have another question about the application process. Will incomplete applications be notified? And would there be an opportunity to supplement if necessary?
So I can start, Mike, and you can add to this. So the IGX, which is the software, the online portal where we are accepting these, has a lot of built-in requirements and built-in required questions, things like that. And you will get errors if you don't fill out certain things that are required. So that's kind of the technical part. As far as completeness, we do review these once we get them, and after the deadline, we do review these. And if there is a time during that summer review phase that we anticipate that the team the HED, DHED Mass Development will want to reach out to certain applicants if we need clarification. That won't be, we won't be able to do that with every application, but there may be cases where there's a particular kind of hole in the information, if you will. And so, yes, we would reach out, and there'll be a process by which we will give the applicant the ability to provide that supplemental information.
Yep, I think that's right. Technically, right, you can't submit an incomplete application technically, but practically speaking, sometimes when we review, we do notice, data holes that are project specific, in which case we'll just put out an RFI, to any applicant that answered a particular question in a particular way. But that's on our end. It's just to make sure we're covering everything in the question here. If an applicant submitted an application and after the fact realized, oh geez, I should have included some other document as an attachment or something, I don't know what the best way to get that, solve that issue would be. I would say just send an email to the one-stop email account, and explain the situation, and we would review it. But I just want to be sure if the person is asking whether or not supplemental materials are on our end or on their end. So on our end, we have a process that will reach out for an RFI for anyone that particular issue affects. On the grantee end, this is the first year, so we haven't covered incomplete applications yet, or applications that a grantee wants to add information to after a submission. I don't know, Juan, any other thoughts there? I think if the application is submitted in advance of the deadline and you want to add something to it, that's pretty straightforward. We can open it back up and allow an applicant to add an additional attachment or alter some language or something. If it's after the deadline, I think there'd probably have to be a formal request process through the one-stop email.
That's a good distinction, right? So if you do, I mean, we have found this during, we used .gx for MassWorks last year, if you all recall, and in the past in Telegrants. And so there are cases where somebody submits before the deadline and then realizes, oh my God, I did that too soon, or I meant to add something. We do have a flexibility if you just reach out, in this case, reach out to the one-stop email account, and somebody will be able to let you back in. But that kind of goes away after the deadline. We won't be able to just open up applications after June 4th. We will only be able to do so if the review team needs additional information. We will reach out to you. And before I forget, I've been meaning to mention that this one-stop is important for all of you to note that is open to not only municipalities, it's open to municipalities, all types of public entities like housing authorities, redevelopment authorities, as well as nonprofits, community development corporations, and even for-profits. Now, the distinction is that it's because some of the grant programs of the 10 allow those type of grantees. So anybody that's allowed to apply for a particular program in the one-stop will continue to be allowed. So this means, like, nonprofits cannot now apply to MassWorks, only municipalities, right? That's very straightforward. And so that's why we say go to the guidelines to understand which programs allow which types of users. We did cover this, I believe, in one of the webinars, and we mapped that out, which type of organization you are versus what you have access to. But it is, we do want to get the word out to community development corporations in particular because of their housing focus, that they are eligible. We worry that people see MassWorks, and since MassWorks is only municipalities and public entities, that they think, oh, this is not for me. They do have access to some of the programs.
Great, thank you. Mary, I think you had a question.
Did, and since we are a regional planning agency, it might be helpful for those on this call to know what our role is with the communities, and it might be helpful for us to know that.
Sure. So, well, first of all, the largest program in the one-stop continues to be MassWorks, right? By far, that's the bulk of what's coming to the one-stop. And by statute, the one in the MassWorks process, we required to consult with the RPA. So the RPAs have a formal role in the actual reading and evaluation of anything that comes in the MassWorks category. And that will continue to be the case. And the other programs may have other components like that. So again, the programs remain the same. So anything that was required for site readiness before, or for brownfields, or for MassWorks, et cetera, will remain in place. And so we will continue to have that relationship. There's always this challenge, right? Because the RPAs are also the key advisors to the municipalities and the applicants. And we expect that you will continue to play that role to help your members be able to put forth the strongest applications. But it's always like a little bit of a dance, right, to try to maintain that balance where you are, one hat that the RPAs wear is advisors and help to the communities, but then you kind of have to switch and become the impartial reader of the applications and provide kind of just feedback to help us, the HED team, discern which ones are the strongest and the most shovel-ready projects. Does that answer?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Dottie, I think you had a question as well.
I did. I'm really excited about this program, and I think it's going to be very helpful to the municipalities with their strategic plans. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit. I know that you can't comment from a federal perspective, but from the state perspective, I know questions have come up about how this aligns with federal grants. And do you have any thoughts about how that works or helps perhaps?
So, yeah, no, this is definitely top of mind for us, right? I mean, because we're about to be a rain shower, I think, of resources coming out of the new recovery stuff from the federal government. I think the way we've seen it at the moment is we don't have any information, right? We don't have any details yet about what the federal programs, exactly how they will roll out and how exactly, some of them will, only a few of them will actually come to the state. Some of them will still come to, like, a lot of the business resources will come through the Small Business Administration. The PPP money, for example, still will come through banks. So there's different outlets that this money will be funneled through. So it's hard to, it is so massive, right? It's so hard to kind of even picture this thing and how big it is. We are mindful, though, that there are these resources coming down the pike, and so I think the way we're looking at it at the moment is that in this referral kind of phase that we see ourselves in, or this referral role, to the extent that we have a view into specific, as the federal government rolls out specific initiatives and specific kind of programming with dollars, we're hoping to be able to then, as part of the feedback, be able to, to flag some of that. I think the problem we're going to run into, right, that we're doing the feedback right now, and we won't have a view into the actual federal programs yet for a little while, I imagine. And so the time, it won't align. So I don't know that we'll be able to do a ton of that in the expression of interest at the moment. But we do, I mean,
I was going to say, from our perspective at OCPC, we're always getting grant opportunities sent to us from the federal and the state level and private, and we're trying to send that out to our members so that they're aware of it. But I think that we're also really trying to look at how to maximize any investment that comes from the state by trying to align it with other opportunities, and having this one stop really makes it a lot less confusing for us and potentially for the municipalities as well.
Yeah, I would say I think we would still then rely on, in terms of getting the word out of the federal program, we would still rely on you, all the RPAs to get, so what we're trying to do is actually match the actual project to a funding source through the expression of interest. And I just don't think we'll be able to, because we won't have enough information about the federal programs to be able to do that effectively. But but knowing what the programs are that are being announced is definitely something that we'll look to the RPAs to help us with. So.
Great, thank you. So it looks like we have, no, it looks like we've covered all the questions here today. Maybe I'll give a couple seconds if anybody wants to raise their hand or ask in the Q&A. You can do that now. We do have one that's come in, more of a comment with some suggestions. So the attendee asks, why not schedule an hour-long Zoom discussion with each city or town about their top 5 rather than having folks fill out more paperwork? The commentee suggests that that could be a simpler way and could help address some of the nuances and increase efficiency. Despite this one-stop gateway, there's still a lot of work required to explore, apply for the various grant programs. Do you have any comments or reply to that?
If I could begin, and then I'm going to hand that off to Juan and then for Marc. You know, it's one of the things that we began last year with COVID and then continue is that to reach out to each of the communities, to the town administrator, to the board of selectmen, to their departments, whoever they want to have that very discussion about identifying the priorities from the community and working with them to be aware. Our plan is to do more of that from at least the Old Colony Planning Council. 17 communities, much easier to corral than 351 cities and towns. But that is our intention. In fact, internally, we've been talking about with Joanne and Dottie going out, making sure our transportation folks are in there because they know of other funding sources, whether it's MassWorks and others through MassDOT. So it is something that we're planning to do with each of the 17 communities that we have. And I'm sure my colleagues in the other regional planning agencies plan to do the same, but good suggestion.
Yeah, I would just say, I mean, the point is very well taken for sure. But as Mary just mentioned, there are 351 municipalities. There are about 240 housing authorities. And when you start counting up the redevelopment authorities, plus all the community development corporations that are eligible for funding here, and then, you know, all the businesses, it's just virtually impossible for us to do a 1-hour Zoom with each and every one that is, you know, potentially eligible. And so again, the point is well taken. And I think, you know, how we've tried to resolve this or deal with this is that the expression of interest is a very short form. You know, there's a template available on the website. You can pull down a PDF of it to see the whole thing. The whole thing's like 6 pages in printed out. That's if you fill out the 5 project sections. We're literally asking like 3 or 4 questions. You know, one of them is, what are your overall goals? What have you done? What are your challenges? And then what have you done over the past 5 years in 2,000 characters or less? And then for each project, we're asking you for the project name, a brief description, and then check off which categories do you think you fall into. That's it. And so we've done this purposely, a very short form, very easy, because we don't want, particularly small towns, to have to worry about not having planning staff. We don't want them to, you know, worry about, nobody needs to hire a grant writer. Nobody needs to, you know, bring in extra people, et cetera. The form is designed to be very streamlined, you know, short form, that anybody that has a view, it could be a select board chair, it could be, you know, anybody in the economic development side of the house at the organization or at the community, that has a view into what the dream is that the community has, what are they trying to do, and can just kind of articulate that. That's all we're asking for the expression of interest. The full app, of course, is going to be much more robust. You know, we'll need more detail. But the expression is purposely designed to be very user-friendly, very, you know, easy for communities to fill out in one sitting.
Great. All right, and I think we've got time for one last question. It's a follow-up to the 43D question. So if the webinar attendee wants to see the new 43D application, is that something they could reach out to you guys for, or is it downloadable from the One Stop?
Mark, you have a?
No, sorry, I'm reading it on the
Yeah.
reading it on the screen.
Yeah. What is, let me just see. Can you repeat that, Joanne?
So, yep. So if the attendee on the webinar today wants to see the new 43D application, is that something they can ask you both about, or is it downloadable from the One Stop?
You know, it's interesting. It should be on the link. I don't have it in front of me. It should be on the link to the program. Off of the One Stop website, we have the link to all the guidelines. And I think the 43D web page.
It's there. I'm looking now. It's there.
Okay, yeah, it's there. Okay, so the 43D page, which there's a link on the One Stop page to it, has the new application template for the for 43D. And obviously anybody here is welcome to reach out, you know, to us as well if you don't find it. And then the onestop@mass.gov is the email for anything related to One Stop. And Mark and I both, you know, as well as the rest of the team, we look at it, and whoever sees it first will respond.
And on the 43D page, if you go to the One Stop page and click on 43D, there's also staff contact information there for Kevin Staley on
yeah.
our staff that manages 43D, and he could answer
That's right.
43D questions directly. But then if you go down all the way to the bottom of the page, you can download a paper copy of the application there.
Yeah. Actually, thanks for reminding me. So, so I would say to anybody here thinking about doing 43D, call Kevin, just or email Kevin. Let him know. I definitely give him a heads up, because he schedules the board meetings for 43D, and so it would be great for him to know if you are thinking of submitting something. Just put it on his radar so that he has in mind when the next board meeting will be, because he's the one who will work with you to, and he can provide technical assistance as well to help you with the application. But if you do have that information, Mark just posted the email, right, for 43D. Yep. So Kevin Staley is the contact. If you're thinking of 43D, even if you haven't started anything, feel free to reach out to Kevin. He can point you to all the right application, you know, where to go, as well as talk you through with the application.
Great, thank you very much. All right, so with that, I'd like to thank Secretary Vega and Marc for joining us today. I think it's been really informative, and I think everybody appreciates having the chance to ask some more questions before the expression of interest deadline. So after you leave this webinar, for the attendees joining us today, if you'd please take an extra 1 minute to fill out our feedback survey, that'd be fantastic. It's only with your help that we can make our events most useful to you, so please do share your feedback with us. Slides and a recording of this webinar will be made available over the next couple of days. We'll include the website link to the One Stop information, as well as contact details for folks that you've heard from today. And if you do have any further questions, please contact Old Colony Planning Council or your regional planning agency, as well as reach out to the One Stop team for help and further advice and support. So with that, that's it for today. Thank you everybody for joining. Have a good one.
Thanks for having us. Bye.